according to this, Mr. Straight. Is the recording going?
The recording's going, and just for the room's information, we do have 4 people now online that are participating.
Okay, I call to order this meeting of the Planning Commission for September 5th, 2023. Sheena, will you take a roll and note people who are not here?
Doug Iverson,
I'm here.
Monty Ayers,
Present.
Alex Patterson,
Present.
Carol Thomas. Present. Those that are not here are Will Kanate, Ryan Penning, and Jerry Horton.
Sorry, I'm late. Okay, the first item of business is to approve the minutes for the August 1st, 2023 Planning Commission minutes. Does anybody have any changes or amendments?
I'd make a motion to approve.
A second.
All right, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the minutes as they are. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Say no. And they passed. So we're good. Okay, tonight we're holding a quasi-judicial meeting tonight for a site development review, property line adjustment, and a conditional use permit for the Gordon Truck Center proposal. The normal progression of events is required disclosures will be read, the legal stuff, get that out of the way. Then staff will make a presentation. And the applicant, Gordon Trucking, I imagine that is Mr. Grosso? Is it? Nick, okay. He'll make a presentation if he wants to. Anyone else who wishes to address the issue can then address the issue, and they'll have 3 minutes to do so. We like to keep it so that it doesn't get too far out of hand. And last but not least, there'll be time for a rebuttal if anybody is here to oppose this. There'll be a time for a rebuttal for the Gordon Trucking people. Okay, commissioners may ask questions of the applicant, staff, and/or anyone else who testifies. Deliberations between commissioners will occur after the public hearing is closed. Okay, I now call to order the public meeting. Shanna, please read the disclosure statements and cover our legal basis, please.
All persons testifying will be deemed parties to the application and must provide their name and full mailing address. The City Development Code specifies applicable criteria to be relied upon in making a decision. Those criteria and findings of fact are in the city staff report. Public testimony should be limited to the criteria and findings of fact or to other city or state land use standards that the person testifying believes apply to the proposed land use action. Failure to raise an issue in person or in writing with sufficient detail to afford the hearing body or the applicants an opportunity to respond to that issue precludes appeal to the City Council or Land Use Board of Appeals or to seek damages in circuit court due to a condition of approval. Before the conclusion of the initial evidentiary hearing, and any participant may ask the Planning Commission for an opportunity to present additional relevant evidence or testimony that is within the scope of the hearing. The hearing body shall grant the request by scheduling a date to finish the hearing continuance to a time and date certain, or by leaving the record open for additional evidence or testimony.
Thank you. Okay, now it's my turn. Okay, do any members of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias?
Chair, I think the folks online are having a little hard time hearing you. If you could pull that mic over.
Sorry,
I'm seeing people grab their headphones online.
we need one of these. Okay, let me repeat that then. Do any members of the commission wish to declare a potential or actual conflict of interest or bias? Do any members of the commission wish to report any site visits or ex parte contacts? Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the jurisdiction of the commission to hear this matter? I'll take that as a no. Does any member of the audience wish to challenge the impartiality or ex parte disclosures of any member of the commission? Okay, great. Matt, I think it's your turn.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Fellow Commissioners, Matt Straight tonight presenting for staff. The project is located on Old Salem Road, just across the street from Clearwater Drive. The zoning on the property is light industrial. The area surrounding the property on the north, south, and east is also light industrial. Across the street is residential zoning and some commercial office. The project includes 3 applications here tonight. There is a site plan review, a property line adjustment, and a conditional use permit. So let's walk through the project description for each one of those individually. Now, before we dive in, I also really want to highlight the fact that this project is really split into 2 projects. The first is, as you can see here in Building A, this building already exists and is a truck repair facility, and they're proposing to expand that from basically its existing 12,000 square feet to a full 60,000 square feet. And so the site for that looks like this. That takes up the entirety of the front part of the property. However, they're also proposing a project in the back of the site, which is going to propose a concrete tilt-up building that will be just over 100,000 square feet. And the applicants haven't proposed a user for that yet. And that's not unusual. We see people come in for spec buildings like that every now and then. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how that works a little bit later on in our presentation. So the site development review is proposing to add a new section, part of which will be 2-story. There's 13 different truck bays, paint booth. There's a new entrance structure proposed, as you can see in this image here. There's a truck sales area as well. And there's going to be some fencing added as well. Now, normally fencing isn't something we usually talk about specifically during a site design review, but our code does specifically say that any industrial projects along Old Salem has to propose fencing specifically through a site design review project. And that was because our city council has had some very serious concerns about the look of Old Salem going up and down. So we've added this extra requirement to make sure that the fencing looks appropriate in the place where it is. So the applicant's proposing some fencing. Here's some images of what they're proposing. The red line you see around the bottom is an outline of where they are proposing that fencing to be. So it's primarily just going to be around the truck center and the trucks inside that truck center. It's not necessarily going to be around the building B in the back of the project site. Building B is located more to the east. It is closer to I-5. And as you mentioned, there's no tenant identified at this point. And it could even be divided up to have several different tenants as they developed it. So any use that comes along that is permitted by right and wants to go in that building does not need to come back for additional design review through this team here at the Planning Commission. If they do need something that's proposed in there that would require a conditional use permit, they would have to come back to the Planning Commission to get their own conditional use permit for that. And this actually would also allow them to divide that building through the interior for several tenants if they wanted to, and they wouldn't have to come back to Planning Commission for that either, as long as they were all permitted by right. So this building has 22 different bay doors proposed inside there. As you can see, it's got some corner massing here on the north side, and it shares access with the project, which we're going to talk about at great length a little bit later. And like we said, it could be multiple tenants by the time it's done, and that's okay. So part of the project description here also includes the property line adjustment that they're proposing. And the property line adjustment is planning to alter the lots in a way that's going to help their proposal be a little bit more consistent. And so they have 2 lots today, and I've colored them here so you can see what they look like today. They're proposing to change them so that they look like that. So it's basically going to segregate the second lot more on the eastern side. And that's why access becomes so much more important. And we'll talk about that access a little bit later. So for a project description of the conditional use permit, that's required because, as you can see here on the screen, in our land use code in the permitted uses, it lists the whole section for conditional uses as well. And both of the items that they want to have permitted for site A, for building A, are both conditional use permits. Now, just as a reminder, why a conditional use permit? What is that about? Well, if you remember, a conditional use permit is required where the use might be acceptable if it blends well with the existing neighborhood. So a CUP adds on a lot more criteria requirements to be very sensitive to the surrounding uses. That's also part of our design review, but there's more of them when you're talking about a conditional use permit. It also allows the city to add a lot more kinds of conditions to the project as well. And we're going to talk about the conditional use permit in more detail here as we go through the criteria. So in order to approve the project tonight, we have to find that the project meets all of the required criteria. We're going to start with a site development review criteria. So the first one is the uses. The uses have to be permitted in the light industrial zone. We've already talked about that. They're both listed as conditional uses. So they are indeed allowed uses. Both the truck repair and the truck sales are listed as conditional uses, and those have to include new trucks, not just the sale of used trucks. That's actually part of the definition of that in the permitted uses. Again, building B doesn't have any users identified at this time, but that's okay. Next, the project also has to meet all of the zoning requirements, and this includes the height of the building. It's under the 50-foot height limit for light industrial, so that's okay. It has to meet the setbacks. There are no setbacks in this case because setbacks only apply when it's next to a residential zone, and across the street from it doesn't count because the street itself is acting as a buffer. That's the idea behind that. And lastly, the lot coverage in the zone has to be consistent, and the lot coverage for the light industrial zone is 90%, and this project is coming in at 81.3%. So it is consistent with the zoning requirements. The project also cannot create negative impacts, including traffic, noise, dust, and glare to the surrounding community, a little bit like the conditional use permit. So as the staff report explains, the applicant has provided a traffic study indicating that the streets have the capacity to accommodate the traffic that is proposed by the applicants. That traffic study also takes it a step further and analyzes not only the surrounding existing projects, but the surrounding approved projects that may not be up and operating. Specifically, the intermodal site was part of their analysis, even though intermodal isn't up and running quite yet. The trucks that would be brought by intermodal were part of that analysis to analyze capacity. Negative noise impacts might be possible from this project. So we've added mitigation measures to address that. Specifically, that includes mitigation for the potential use of Jake brakes as an addition of this project to the area and the impacts that might have on the surrounding community. And then it also addresses the use of pneumatic air tools should they become a problem. And our conditions of approval, which were in your staff report, speak specifically to how we handled that. There shouldn't be any dust issues on the site because they're actually going to be paving over the existing gravel lot. So that's going to cut down dramatically on the dust that is there today. And as far as glare is concerned, we've required a condition of approval that they give us a lighting plan, which will show the light cast of all the lights they're proposing to make sure that that doesn't bleed over onto any other neighboring properties. And therefore, that controls the impacts. So adequate facilities also exist in Old Salem, specifically meaning the access, the water, the sewer, and the stormwater. Those are all already there. An additional water meter is going to be required for the second lot. The right-of-way permits from the county are going to be required to access them. Just as a reminder, Old Salem is a county facility, not a City of Millersburg facility. So they're going to need specific access permits from the county, and the county has notified us of that. And conditions of approval have been added to ensure that the correct standards are used for those, the implementation of those infrastructure. So moving on from the site development review criteria, let's talk now about the property line adjustment criteria. There aren't a lot of them. The action basically says that you can't create more parcels than exist today. And like we talked about, there's already 2 existing lots. They're reconfiguring them, but there will be 2 after they're done reconfiguring them. So it's consistent with that requirement. Newly configured lots can't violate any of the standards in the zone, meaning you can't shift the line to be 2 feet from the building if there's a 5-foot setback. They're not doing any of that. The new lot lines will respect the zoning requirements. Now, regarding access, the area shown in blue on this slide is actually not the applicant's property, but they're currently using that for access today. Now that's okay. They've worked out an easement agreement with the neighbor a long time ago that allows them to use that property for the access. Now the applicant has indicated that that existing easement will also cover the expanded use for both their expanded building A as well as building B, the new use in the back. Now we went through those documents and it wasn't crystal clear to us if that's the case. We're not sure if the new expanded use on the second site is accommodated by that easement. So what we did is we just added a condition of approval asking them to help clarify that for us and point out that it actually does accommodate the additional use. And we gave them another option too in that condition of approval. If they want to just shift the easement to be entirely on their property, like you see on this slide, to provide access, that's fine too. So there's lots of choices for them. We just need to be sure it's crystal clear to us, because access, when you're trying to segregate that lot from the street, access becomes a big deal because we need to make sure that's crystal clear in order to say they're consistent with our code. So we've addressed that through the conditions of approval. The last criteria requirement says that they can't put the new lot lines underneath existing buildings. Well, they're not doing that, so they're consistent with that as well. So the last application that they're proposing is the conditional use permit, and there are 4 criteria for a conditional use permit. The first criteria is very similar to the one for site design review in that the uses have to be allowed in the zone and it has to be consistent with the standards of the zone. So we've already demonstrated that they're consistent with that. As discussed before, these are indeed listed in that zone, so they're okay in that regard. Other standards exist as well, and on the project, they have to meet all the other standards from our zoning code, not just the zoning standards, but the rest of our zoning code as well. And we're going to go over that in just a moment. But before we leave this section, there is a detail in the conditional use requirement that I wanted to review with you because it's important for this project. So what I've done is I've blown that up. Number 6 in our zoning code requirement, which is the conditional use permit section, specifically says what kind of use can be allowed there. And I've blown it up here for you to see. And there's the actual text from the code. And you see the repair use is permitted, but it has some caveats. The underlined section that I put up there specifically states that the storage of disassembled and damaged vehicles can't be seen from a street. And as this was designed on the site plan review, we weren't sure that that was being accommodated. So we added a condition of approval, simply explaining that if they are going to be storing disassembled vehicles on the site, that needs to be screened, and they need to bring in that screening beforehand and make sure it meets our code requirements. I didn't write a requirement to have it come back to the planning commission to have you review it. I just left it with the community development director, me, so they can bring it in to make sure that it meets the code. We'll have to make sure that's okay with the planning commission as well, but that's just going to be easier moving forward than having to bring it back to the planning commission. The second criteria asks if the characteristics of the site are suitable for the use. Now, what they mean by that is things like shape, topography, natural features on the site, things like that. And in this case, the site is flat. There's no natural features to speak of, at least where they're proposing development. And the site is very suitable to the use. It's been doing this use for quite a number of years already. The third criteria asks if the proposal is timely, which is an interesting term. And what they mean by that is they just want to make sure that the streets are, big enough to accommodate the use, that the utilities are large enough to accommodate the use. And in this case, we've already discussed that. They provided a traffic study that clarified that the streets have the capacity to accommodate the additional 2 uses, and all the infrastructure already exists in the streets to be able to accommodate this use. This is largely considered an infill project, and so the characteristics of the site are very timely. Now, the last criteria is the big one for a conditional use permit, because this one says that it can't alter the it can't alter the character of the area. And so this allows the city to add additional mitigation to the project if it's going to have any substantial impacts to the neighbors, like noise, light, glare, traffic, things like that. And so here, that means that assuring the residential uses across the street aren't going to be negatively impacted. Now, the project has a facade that will be greatly improved, as you can see here in the image, and they're going to add additional landscaping, and that's going to blend very well with the neighborhood. And so we feel that's been met. The noise and traffic have already been discussed. We've added a few mitigation measures to make sure that that's been addressed as well. And with those in place, we feel that this criteria was met. So that rounds out all of the criteria. And so now what we would normally do is talk about the standards that are in our code. And the standards are a little bit different from the zoning standards. They're the other standards like street size, sidewalk size, things like that. And those would apply generally to the site development review and the CUP, not necessarily the property line adjustment. All we really have there is the criteria. And so we've already covered that. Now, the staff report walks through several different standards. I didn't think all of them needed reiterated here verbally in my presentation today, but there is one that I wanted to touch on. Chapter 3 talks about our street standards. And in this case, no street improvements are required, and the county has confirmed that. But they are going to have to add some sidewalks to the project. Those are proposed. Those are included in their development, and so they're consistent with those requirements as well. So before I go into this last recommendation, I just wanted to mention that we passed out a memo to the Planning Commission, which was just kind of a beefed up narrative from the applicant that more clearly explained from their perspective how they met all of our criteria requirements as well, and our standards. And so with that, I've got a motion here on the screen. Staff is recommending that the project be approved, and I have a recommended motion here on the screen for you. So that concludes my presentation. Myself and the applicants are available if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Matt. Appreciate it. This is the time when the applicant has a say-so if he would like to come and add any additional information. You're more than welcome to do that now.
Perfect. I'll go ahead and start. Can you hear me?
Now, Chair, just to let you know, we've had quite a few people here online, and so we'll have to make sure that if any of them wants to speak, we accommodate them as well. And part of the applicant's team is also online, and so if we have any questions, if you're going to cover everything that they need to cover, let me know if you want them to jump in for any reason. I'll have to do some computer wizardry to let us hear them. So let me know if you want them to pipe in.
Great, thank you.
You got it.
To the commission and everyone this afternoon. My name is Dominic Nicandri. I'm the Director of Facilities for Gordon Truck Centers. I've worked for the Gordon family businesses for almost 21 years now. After I spent 4 years at Oregon State University, spent quite a bit of time here in the Valley. Glad to be back. Just a little bit of history about the family business and the site and our plans. The Gordon family has been in the transportation business since 1946 when Jay Gordon founded Gordon Fast Freight. Gordon's started Gordon Trucking, GTI, which later acquired the Cascade Express property here in Millersburg, which is how the property came into the family's ownership and under their in their business portfolio. That was in the early 2000s. In 1986, the Gordon family opened their first Freightliner dealership in Pacific, Washington, which is where our headquarters is up in the Tacoma area. But they spent a lot of time operating in the Willamette Valley in the trucking days with Target, Georgia Pacific, the old Willamette Industries mill being some key customers for both Cascade Express and Gordon Trucking. In 2013, the Gordon family sold the trucking business to Heartland Express. And in 2015, they began acquiring Freightliner dealerships throughout the Pacific Northwest, in addition to the 3 that they already had within the state of Washington. And now the Gordon family of dealerships extends from Alaska, Washington, Idaho, Oregon, and now recently into Northern California. The Freightliner dealerships support trucking, transportation, local municipalities, construction companies, any number of businesses that operate commercial vehicles. There's a saying that, if you bought it, a truck brought it, and that's completely the case. We all learned during the pandemic when toilet paper was a shortage and when everyone was ordering online, it was trucking and transportation that kept everything moving. And we're here to support that, selling, servicing, and repairing commercial vehicles of all shapes and sizes. The city of Millersburg, I noticed their motto, a community linking agriculture and industry. And transportation and trucking is what links agriculture and industry, and we're glad to support that. And it's not just long haul trucking. There's a lot of local municipal activities. We do a lot of repairs to things like school buses, transit buses, local lumber delivery vehicles, box trucks, you name it, any type of vehicle that's out there supporting people in their daily lives. We're there to support and sell and keep on the road and keep communities moving. We're excited to propose this, bring some additional jobs and support to the area. We know there's a lot of companies that have set up distribution centers in the area, and with the intermodal project here, we think there's some growth opportunity in the area, and we're going to be glad to support that. We currently have 15 employees at the dealership there, or at the repair shop now. In the final state, this project would bring that to 53, so we'd be adding 38 jobs total when we're up to full steam. The building B, the warehouse that was mentioned, that is a spec build, as you said. We don't know who would be in that, but using some general data from the Commercial Real Estate Development Association, the NAIOP, they average, the math works out to there be about 112 jobs that could potentially come based on that building, depending on the use, if it's warehousing or manufacturing. There's higher or lower densities, but an average use would be about 112 folks there. There's, in addition to some of the things that have been mentioned, there's some other specifics that we've included in the site, which is planning for electric vehicle charging, commercial electric vehicle charging. We will be installing infrastructure to support that. The electric vehicles, the state of Oregon and California and several other states have requirements for zero emission vehicle sales as a percentage going forward, getting progressively more starting next year and through the next decade, up to a very high percentage. And we will be designing this site to support that with EV charging capability included in the design, and that we will be able to extend that. So we'll be in the plans and in the mix with the zero emission vehicles going forward. Yeah, I think that's about it. We're happy to be here in Millersburg. I've been here a long time, and we're really looking forward to making a nice facility that blends in cohesively with the aesthetic of the area, and spend some extra time on making sure that everything looks great.
Thanks very much, Dominic. Appreciate the information. Okay, now it's time to turn it over to the general public. Matt, should we start off with the online people first?
Sure, we can do that. Anybody online wishing to speak at this time?
Please remember to keep your testimony to 3 minutes or less.
You can go ahead and just unmute and speak up if you do want to speak, or raise your hand, or any variety of ways to let me know. So far, not seeing anyone, Chair. Looks like everybody's just listening in.
Good. That's good. Okay, well, we have 4 people here that are listed on our agenda. If there's any more than 4 people, we'll get to you. So who would like to come up first? Yes, please. Yes, please come up here so we can hear you on the microphone.
And if you didn't put your name on here, make sure you give us your name and address for the record.
My name's Ted Pratt. I live on Coquille Court in Millersburg. I kind of have a 2-part question. The first part would be the new transfer station that isn't up and running yet. Is that going to be happening soon or not at all? Can you give me a brief? Will help me on my second part of the question.
Well,
Where are we out on that thing?
are you talking about the intermodal?
Yeah.
Okay, from what I've heard, they'll get to it when they get to it. I mean, unfortunately, it's been moving back and moving back and moving back. They're having problems, but I don't know anything other than that. I haven't been given any specific date.
Well, that leads me to the second part of my question. You said you did a traffic study. We don't know how much traffic that's going to bring in. Really, we have no idea. It's not running yet. So I'm wondering about this traffic study. How can that be very accurate? We already have a number of trucking companies in Millersburg. Starting with the south end moving north, we've got the partial plant there. We've got the fuel distributor. We've got another trucking outfit. Now we put that Love's down there, and that's a mess down there on that end. there's so much congestion down there, it's terrible. So you want to put another trucking business in the middle of all this. We really don't, I mean, with the tenant, we don't know who's gonna be there yet. How much more traffic's that gonna bring in? We don't know how much traffic that's gonna bring in. And so you said you did a traffic study, but how reliable is that traffic study? We don't even know how much traffic's gonna be.
The traffic study was done basically aimed at Gordon Trucking. Had nothing to do with the intermodal. Janelle?
I can address that a little bit. So I'm the city engineer. So when the intermodal project went through this process of planning, they did a traffic study. And those numbers are still what these future projections are based on. So when this project did their traffic study, they took those numbers and assumed that traffic already exists today and added that in to their study. In addition to doing traffic counts on what's there today. So they did traffic counts, said this is the baseline. Then they took the intermodal numbers from their traffic study and said, okay, assuming this is happening today, on top of that, our traffic is what we're looking at. And it still showed that no changes to Old Salem Road were necessary in order to meet the standards that we require for traffic.
That was my biggest concern, was the traffic. I've lived out here in Millersburg for 20 years, and I know the traffic has increased tremendously on Old Salem Road in the last number of years.
Mhm.
And not living too far from this facility, I just wonder about the noise. That's my biggest concern in the traffic. So I just don't think that's been addressed quite the way it should yet, not knowing how much the additional tenant will bring in. We don't even know it's going to be there. Plus this facility that isn't open yet. If it ever opens. So that's just some of my own concerns.
Okay, thank you for your
Thank
input. Yes,
I don't often get up and speak in front of people, so excuse me if I'm a bit nervous.
If you didn't sign in on the sheet, make sure you tell us what your name and address is. You don't need to, you can just state it in the record.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Greg Sailing. I live at 3321 Clearwater Drive. So it's pretty much right down the street from this proposed expansion. And I reiterate my concerns with the traffic impact. I have not seen the traffic study. Has this been made public for everyone to view that is going to be impacted by this?
Yes, sir.
I think all the residents of Millersburg rely on Old Salem Road as our only way in and out. And we're already seeing a lot of stress on the traffic on Old Salem at times where it takes quite a bit of extra time to get in and out of my neighborhood. Especially at 5 o'clock when I'm coming home, it can get horrendous. And so down the road, when we see that these expansions are negatively impacting the traffic on Old Salem Road, who's going to pay to improve that? Because I think that needs to be dealt with upfront right now. We need more freeway access to get traffic in and out, at least one more on and off ramp off of I-5, and probably widening the road. And I don't know that we have room to widen it, especially with this plan. It looks like they're going right up to the road. Sidewalks, I don't care about. I care about traffic. Because I'm not walking in and out of my neighborhood, I'm driving in and out. So that's about all I have to say.
okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. Next up,
This one works too, I guess.
Correct.
Excellent. Hi, my name is Frank Grosso. Last name spelled Grosso. I live on 54th Avenue, 3084. Just got a few questions with regards to this. Are there any tax breaks that are being given for this project from the city that you know of?
none that I'm aware of, no.
It's usually sometimes we do tax breaks in order to bring in additional.
But they're usually, from what I've gathered, they're usually more or less I forget the term that they use for it, the
Economic development?
Typically,
well, no,
well, usually this opportunity is for you to provide testimony. Questions can be directed at staff or the applicant, not the chair.
What's being, I'm asking anybody who's here.
I know, I'm just stating that for the record.
Chair, would you like?
I'm not supposed to be answering the questions. I'm just supposed to be taking input.
Right.
Well, fine, that's, anybody can answer the question though.
Okay. Well, Janelle?
Well, I think this would be a good question for the applicant to answer during their period.
Okay.
So maybe there can be follow-up in his rebuttal that when he comes forward, so. Again, I'm gonna bring up the question on additional traffic that this project is going to cause. You do talk about a traffic study, you do say that there's public information there. Can you explain where that public information is, where the traffic study is? Because I noticed that nothing is being provided tonight with regards to that. And in addition to the traffic study, currently I think the major access to this area is right across the street from Clearwater. So is that access still going to continue, or is that planning on being blocked off? Is the access into Clearwater going to be in conflict with, in other words, is that going to become a four-way intersection more so than it is right now?
Chair, would you like me to address those questions?
Yeah, please. I'm sorry.
No, Clearwater isn't being planned to be closed in any way.
I'm not asking if Clearwater is going to be closed. I'm asking if the access to this property right now has access right across the street from Clearwater.
Yes, as you can see in this one, currently today, there's a driveway directly across from Clearwater. That one's
Yes.
being closed, and they're going to stagger the driveways at the opposite ends of the project.
Okay,
You can see here the side entrance here and the side entrance on the far side. One of those driveways doesn't exist today,
okay.
the one on the south side,
So
but that's
that
going to be
access,
added.
that access that's there now is going to be closed, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay. And another question that I have is with regards to, you're talking about the usage of exhaust brakes, Jake brakes, and you have plans for mitigation of that. What is the plan for mitigation of that? Because I believe right now you currently have an ordinance of the city that says Jake brakes are prohibited within the city.
Correct. Did you read the staff report? It was in there.
Excuse me?
Did you read the staff report? It was written in there as well as
I have
the
not read
traffic
staff.
study.
The
which
only
was
thing I've read is
provided in the
just the
staff report.
notification of this meeting.
Okay. Yeah, well, all that information is available online, and there was a mitigation measure added that the signs should be added to the exiting driveways to this facility to remind the drivers that the use of Jake brakes isn't allowed. You're right, we already have an ordinance in the city that says that we can't have those used in our city, but this is just to remind any of the drivers leaving the facility
So signs are going to be placed where?
at the exits of the facility.
The exits, okay. But
So
usually,
as trucks are leaving.
usually they're not running Jake brakes at the exit of the facility that are now going to enter onto Old Salem Road. They're using Jake brakes on Old Salem Road.
In that case, it should be covered by the ordinance that already exists.
But you don't post that information very well. I've seen one sign down there on Morningstar Road. I'm not sure where another one is. I don't see really anything on Old Salem Road that indicates Jake brakes are not allowed. And I don't see any enforcement with regards to the ordinances of that. So,
Okay, Mr. Grosso, we've exceeded our 3-minute time limit.
oh, geez, my gosh, then I better shut up. I guess that's the
Well,
way of getting
well,
out of answering the questions, right? Thank you.
The packet is online for everyone to view. And Dominic may want to say something afterwards. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Karen Saylor. My husband talked a couple minutes ago. I have 3321 Clearwater Drive. I'm concerned about a few things. First of all, we clearly own property on Clearwater. And I'm concerned about if we put too much trucking facilities around here, which we seem to be doing, what is that going to do to the property value of our property on Clearwater? That's been a concern of mine for a while, having this go in right across the street from Clearwater Drive. It just increases that concern. I know you can't tell me what it's going, you're not a real estate agent. However, I'm concerned because down the road, when we go to sell our house, we want to be able to make the money off the property that we have a right to make. And I'm concerned that this facility, between the noise and the traffic and other things that will cause problems, will lower the property value of the property on Clearwater. And that goes for anybody who lives in that immediate area on Clearwater, Coquille, Clearwater Court, that whole area that's going to be affected. 54th would be affected. This is a real concern of mine because we made an investment. And just like anybody else who is owning property, they made an investment. And they want to be able to see the gain off that investment down the road when they sell. And I don't want to have our property values dropping because we're putting more trucking in. So that's a real concern of mine. The other thing is, Old Salem Road is the main drag going in and out of Millersburg. There is no other option to get in and out of the area. You can go back in, but you're still going to come back out to Old Salem Road. If traffic gets very bad on Old Salem Road, that's going to be a problem. We don't know, we really don't know what the impact of the intermodal is going to be. You can do a traffic study, but I can tell you that if it's anything like what happened down at Love's, it's going to be bad. And we're not doing anything down, any kind of access, any kind of streetlights, nothing down near the intermodal. And now you're adding another trucking situation, large trucking situation between the two we've already got. I just think this is a really bad idea. And as a property owner in the area, I am concerned about the noise, about the property values, and about other things.
All those issues have been taken care of. They've been reviewed and they have been basically.
But how do you know the traffic study? How do you know did you have a traffic study done before you put Love's in? Did you know that it was going to be as much of a problem down there than it is now?
I didn't have anything to do with Love's, so I
Okay.
don't know about
So,
that.
I mean, we're looking at traffic studies. Let's take a look at the realistic of what's already happened. If a traffic study, I'm sure was done before you put Love's, before Love's was put in, that would be my assumption. Right now, that's a very heavy traffic area. It needs more control down there. It's accidents waiting to happen, large trucks going in and out. If there was a traffic study done, to me, that traffic study failed. Okay? So we don't know what the impact of the intermodal is. And that's a concern because now you're adding a third thing to it. So we as residents of Millersburg need to be able to have a way in and out of where we live. And Old Salem Road is it. And I'm very concerned about what that does to the traffic. And as a result, what it'll do to the property values. So I think it needs to be investigated a whole lot further before we allow another trucking establishment to continue to grow I know they're already there, but to be allowed to grow in our area, we need to really take a look what's going to be happening.
That's your time.
Thank you.
Folks, as we move forward, just a reminder, property values are not part of the applicable approval criteria. Testimony needs to be tailored to the approval criteria and responsive to evidence in the record. Where testimony has already been submitted regarding the traffic study, it's duplicative at this point. It's been noted. So if you want to use your time to address other items, that would be a better use of time.
Okay, so you're saying that our concerns about traffic.
Traffic is valid, but it's been raised and identified as a
Okay,
concern.
all right.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Pam Thomas. I'm at 3439 Silusla Court. And I agree with my neighbors, the concern about traffic, and I agree with that. I also want to raise the issue of noise because currently I've been woken in the middle of the night with the sound of the trucking operations. And my concern is that additional expansion of that operation will produce additional noise. And this is after 10 o'clock at night. So one of my questions is, what is the hours of operation of the proposed facility? Is there anybody that can answer that?
The applicant can address that.
During his rebuttal. So you feel free to go ahead and continue. They'll address that when they have a chance to
Very
come back.
good, thank you. And then also the lighting, you had mentioned that, going back to the noise, when I read the staff report, the only thing provision I could see addressing that was additional signage. And I just question whether that's going to be sufficient. And then the other concern I had was regarding the lighting, and on the review, it said that there would be a study made, so no additional impacts would be made. The lighting already affects, and especially in the wintertime when the trees lose their leaves, I can see lights from the facility from my backyard. So I just wanted that to be added to your agenda. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Anybody else online? You can either unmute yourself and just let me know, and then I can put you on the house system, or you can send me any other information. Looks like there's nobody else online.
Okay, Dominic, you have the floor.
Now, just a reminder, part of his team is online as well, and so if you want me to chime any of them in, just let me know.
Very good. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your concerns. So I've jotted down a couple of notes, and I'll go over. Mr. Straight here already mentioned one in regards to the access. So we specifically did eliminate the entrance that is directly across from Clearwater Drive, so there would not be turning conflicts for simultaneous vehicles turning and entering. So it allows in the traffic study, I believe, covered it as well. I don't have it in front of me, but it covered vehicles are able to slow and enter and exit the site, along with vehicles slowing and entering and exiting Clearwater without conflict by moving the driveways. So we were mindful of that and included that in the plan. One other thing I wanted to mention in regard to noise and Jake brake, et cetera. And I mentioned it earlier, primarily with the electric vehicles, is as more and more EVs enter the fleet, those vehicles do not have internal combustion engines, and over the coming decade, those vehicles are much quieter, alarmingly so. Actually, if you've driven one, you expect lots of noise. There's virtually no noise that comes out of them whatsoever. So as more and more of those enter the fleet, which we expect and which regulations are going to require, that will be quieting the vehicles down. The actual activity on the property, is not necessarily, there is not any Jake brake activity or anything of the such on the property. So that really is a concern of traffic that's going by. So it may not even necessarily be this property. And that brings me to another point. The Loves has been mentioned. And I kind of wanted to bring up real quick sort of the characteristic of what would go on at this site. The Loves truck stop is very transient. You have hundreds of trucks, or several trucks per hour arriving at the site for drivers to fuel, eat, rest, sleep overnight. That's not the case with this site. Our traffic and trip generation in the report is much less than this. A vehicle will arrive at the site to be repaired. It will stay there for a period of days, and it will leave the site. So we have 16 bays, but we're not like a Jiffy Lube. Our repair time is much longer than that. Like sometimes to our customers chagrin a little bit, but it will not generate the high volume of traffic that the truck stop does. It's a much lower trip generation facility.
Sure. Dominic, I have a relevant question. So of your vehicles that are being sold or serviced at the facility, how many of them are laden with full trailers, or are they coming in without trailers for the most part?
So some will come in with trailers, so some of the repair equipment will be a transient fleet. You could have a trucker from Omaha, Nebraska that's having a problem with his vehicle, has a load. They'll arrive at the site. Some of the site parking is dedicated to that. There are restrictions for vehicles that show up. People may have concerns about hazmat or materials. Loaded hazmat trailers can't be left, so you can't have a loaded fuel truck or something like that, for example, at the site. Those have to be unloaded before they're able to be repaired. And a lot of vehicles then, it'll be some of your local fleets, municipalities, and they may have their own terminal yard or property elsewhere where they'll leave the trailer. It'll just be the truck that will drive in, or if it's inoperable, it'll be towed in. So. Last one that I made a note on here that I wanted to make a note about, hours of operation. So the business, we don't know what the hours are. Some of our other dealerships, the current business currently is 7 a.m. to 5 p.m., the current operation that's there. Some of our other larger operations, such as like our Medford, Oregon, or Pacific Washington location, are open 6 a.m. until 10 or 11 p.m. With a smaller second shift. And again, that's going to be a lot less traffic. You're not going to have fleets and shops arriving to pick up parts or things like that in the later hours. So it's a reduced shift late at night generally.
Dominic, another concern that was brought up was Jake Brake signs located at the exit only. Is there any provision for adding those prior to entrance of the facility? Because I think that is a valid concern.
I haven't. Yeah, I haven't seen the provision in the site plan or in the development review. We don't have an issue adding the signs on the outbound. Inbound wouldn't be on our property. That would be a county issue in our opinion. So any Jake Brake concerns through or past the facility, we would say would be a county concern that should be addressed.
Thank you.
I can edit it. Council's actually had many discussions on this issue of Jake Brakes and enforcement with the county, that sort of thing. And more signage could be added, but I would encourage anybody who's concerned about that to take that to a different forum than this meeting, because there are ongoing discussions about it.
And that's it as far as my providing comments.
Thank you.
Will, Megan, did you guys want to add anything to that? Part of the applicant's team.
Yeah, well, can you hear me? Okay.
Okay.
We are not. In regards to tax breaks, we are not currently seeking any. We may be seeking some money for grant funding for some of the EV charging dispensing, but we are not currently seeking any tax breaks for the property. None have been discussed to my knowledge. And the second building, if there was anything, that would be one of the tenants, and we're not aware of anything there at this time either.
Okay, thank you. Okay, are there any further comments or clarifications that staff may have?
No, just that when the city was formed, we had to decide what kind of land uses we wanted in which places. We decided long ago where the residential was going to be, where the light industrial was going to be, where the heavy industrial was going to be. And at that point, we took that information and then designed a master transportation system for the city. And that master transportation system was designed with the intent of accommodating a full build-out capacity of what the city could do as far as the labeling of streets, things like that. And then as individual projects come along, we make sure that those are building out the maximum size of the streets that are needed based on our master transportation system plan. The traffic studies analyze that and make sure that what's being proposed fits in with the master transportation plan, and then implements any mitigation that might be needed based on what they're doing. And so both the traffic study and the transportation master system plan were both analyzed during the review of this project.
Okay, thank you very much. Let's see. So I guess we're just about done with the public hearing then. So I'm going to go ahead and close the public hearing. This is the time where the commissioners now have to ask questions of the applicant or of staff if they have any questions.
I just wanted to clarify a point, because Old Salem is a county road, right? It's not a city road, so the city doesn't have much say on what's done with it, right?
You want to tackle this one or you want me to?
I can start. You're right, it is a county road, so permits for accesses, things like that are issued by the county, and we work very closely with the county. So our land use code applies in addition to the county road requirements. So it doesn't mean we have no influence over what happens on Old Salem Road, but they're the ultimate authority because it is their road in approving or not approving something. But we have never gotten into a situation where we've disagreed. We've been able to work that out because our goals are all the same and our plans align in that we want to, keep our traffic or transportation facilities functioning as they were designed to function.
Okay, Matt, would you put up the? Okay, at this time, the chair will entertain a motion to approve the committee if there are no objections.
I make a motion to, that the planning commission approve site development review SP 23-02, LA 23-01, and CUP 23-01 with the conditions of approval.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? No. Motion has passed. Okay. Let's see. I'd like to thank all of the people who are here to present their point of view this evening. If you do have any, there is an appeal process that goes through the city council, and you should have filed an appeal with them within 15 days. If you have appealed the decision that we have made this evening. Okay. Let's see. I'd like to, at this point, I'd like to swap a couple of items.
Mr. Chair, can I make a comment real quick before we go on?
I'm sorry.
It's not really applicable to this specific project, so I don't want to say this during the hearing, but there are a lot of long-term transportation planning activities going on. We are working closely with the county. We know there are concerns about traffic in Old Salem. So if you would like to talk about that big picture, not specific to this project, I'd be happy to talk with you anytime if you want to come by City Hall. And there's a lot of material online, but I know that can be hard to dig through. So just wanted to, I heard a lot of concerns about traffic, Jake breaks and things like that, but those things are being discussed and some things, plans are in the works for different things to address them. And we do work closely with the county.
And another thing, that all of the information that was presented here this evening is usually online a week before every planning commission meeting. So if you want to, you can go and take a look at it and see what the recommendations are, any conditions of approval and things of that nature. It's really informative. It's up there under the planning commission's portion of the site. Okay, let's see. Matt, do we have any updates of anything coming in the near future?
I do have some planner updates for you. And this is, the first item here is more of a conversation that I wanted to have with the Planning Commission regarding some confusion that we have on metal RV covers here in our city. There are a lot of them that have been constructed in our city without permits, and they do require permits. And so just to provide some facts on this, any metal RV cover is considered a structure in our city. They do need a building permit if they're over 200 square feet, and they're considered accessory structures pursuant to our code. And chapter 3.15 applies when an accessory structure is being built in our city. Now, there is a little bit of confusion on the standards, and we've been implementing it a certain way, and we want to be sure that the Planning Commission agreed, and we have some suggestions for how we might try to shore up this confusion and make it a little bit easier to understand. So this is what the code looks like today for accessory structures. I'm not going to make you read that, it's really small, but footnote number 2 up there explains this. And it says that the siding shall have similar materials and color as the primary dwelling, is what that says. And we've been implementing that to mean the roofs as well have to match the existing structure. So if the primary structure has shingles, the accessory structure has shingles. The fact that this is an RV cover, it's an accessory structure just the same, so the same rules apply. And so we've been telling folks that metal RV covers aren't permitted, and they're gonna have to make that match the house in a different way. Now, if a single family home had a metal roof, could they then do a metal RV cover? Perhaps, because then it would match. So it's not a rule against metal RV covers per se, it just says they have to match the single family home. And usually the supports don't, and usually the roof of the metal structure doesn't either. So here's a couple of images of what we're talking about. And the Planning Commission and the City Council spent a lot of time discussing accessory structures when the code was updated about 4 years ago. And these did come up, and it was determined that these are indeed accessory structures and the rules for accessory structures apply. So really what we're talking about is the specificity regarding the roof types on these. And so I wanted to also point out that a structure like you see here wouldn't be permitted for a number of different reasons, because this isn't consistent with the setback requirements because it's a structure. And so it has a side yard setback of 5 feet. As you can see here, it's on the property line. It would also violate the height requirement for an accessory structure because it's so tall. And so the design is one of the issues with those. There's other issues as well. So how could an RV cover possibly meet the design requirements? Well, here's an example of one that would match. See, the roof structures have similar materials and they do match. Now, wood usually works. Wood usually matches the house a lot more. Yes, it's much more expensive. We understand that. But we're trying to implement what the City Council and the Planning Commission, before some of you, implemented in the code requirements. So the question to you here tonight is, are you comfortable, A, with the way staff is interpreting that, and B, with the possibility of adding some changes to our code to clarify it? So what might that look like? This is what we think those might look like. And again, these are just suggestions. We don't have to do it this way. But one of the suggestions we make is to add roofing to the siding as well. So it's the siding and roofing have to match the house. That way it's more clear to folks as well. And then we could even add a whole new footnote here, footnote number 4. That's why it's in red. It would be all new. That specifies, just so folks can understand, that RV covers and carports are considered accessory structures if they're over 200 square feet. Now, that's already true, but adding it to the code might help people get their arms around that a little bit more and just be more clear to folks moving forward. So that's the extent of that. I just wanted to have a conversation with you folks about that and see how you felt about that.
Matt, can I add something?
Oh, sure.
Chair. So as Matt said, there were a lot of hours put into that code revision where this came out, and there was very intentional design around making accessory structures match the home. And that was what people wanted. Planning Commission and Council are the bodies that make those rules, and they could be changed. Staff is interpreting what we understood to be the direction and what went into the code at the time. But if Planning Commission and Council wanted to change that, that's also always on the table.
Sure. Which is why we wanted to bring it to you in an informal way now, just to get some informal input from you. And then if we'll take that input and take that forward with an actual code update. So I'm not looking for an action.
Right.
Just a conversation.
Understand. And
Okay.
I'm not really ready to
Well, that's
talk
fine,
about
too.
this. I'd like to think about it.
That's fine
For
too.
a while.
You bet.
I'm really not ready to make any probably constructive input yet. So I'll defer to other members.
And I just have a question. It would not be retroactive, right? It would be any new structures that this would apply to?
Well, no, let me clarify that. We've been implementing it this way since the code was approved, 4 years ago. We've been implementing the fact that the roofs have to match the houses. And we've turned down quite a few metal RV covers. And a lot of those people have gone back and come back with designs that were consistent with the house and therefore consistent with the City Council's vision. And so it's possible to do that. So it wouldn't be, so when you say it's retroactive, we've already been implementing it that way. We just wanted to come forward and try and clear up some of the confusion with these code edits. That's really. what we're talking about.
You wouldn't be asking people to remove what they have if it's metal.
Well, people who have built metal RV covers without permits have done so illegally. And we don't proactively go after those folks, but if our county code enforcement, which deals with building permits, sees those, they can issue a corrective action, which would include removing it. So we're not planning on going out after people, but the county might. And the county is part of this clarification. Let me add that too. Our county code enforcement officer has asked us for clarification on this as well, because they want to try and help us implement what we're looking to do. And remember, also on the table is just, hey, planning, you're crazy. We think metal RV covers are what everybody should be doing. Just let them happen, and we can work on that too and change those rules. That's up to you folks in city council, ultimately city council. But that's why we wanted to bring it to you and have this conversation.
So basically what would be authorized would be if they removed the metal covering and just had the RV there. That would be okay.
Well, you're certainly allowed to park an RV on your property if that's what you mean, sure.
Yeah, that's what I'm getting.
Oh, yeah.
at. So it's either match or remove. Okay.
Matt, were you around 4 years ago when that was initially? Okay, was that the original intent of writing it that way, to include the and roofing? It seems like that wasn't included, so.
And Janelle, jump in here, correct me if I'm wrong, but when we talked about that, we didn't talk specifically about the impacts of the code update on metal RV covers, and should we say roofs or should we not say roofs? Now, we did have that conversation about accessory structures in general. Should the roofs match? City Council Planning Commission said yes, absolutely. Should the siding match? Yes, absolutely. Roofing didn't make its way into the text. It probably should have. But that question wasn't asked through the lens of specifically metal RV covers. And now we did talk about RV covers, and it was agreed they should be accessory structures. Therefore, all those rules are applicable to it. That part was said. But as far as I know, we didn't have a specific conversation on that, but Janelle was there too.
No, I don't recall metal RV covers being a large discussion, but I do recall the wanting things to match and look nice in the neighborhoods was a lot of what was behind that. And just to clarify, I think Matt and my conversations over the last couple of years about this weren't, we'll just say it means roofing too. It was that, well, with those structures, you can't attach siding that matches the house generally. So it wasn't just that the roofing doesn't match, so it doesn't, you can't meet the siding part of the code with that kind of structure. And when the siding starts to come down, the roofing comes down the sides, then it's siding. And multiple pictures had that.
Yeah, you can see it here on the side. That siding doesn't match the house. So it's another reason this one wouldn't be approvable.
What do our neighbors do? Like Albany, they have.
I didn't do an analysis on that. I don't know. I can and bring it back to you and let you know.
That would be interesting.
Okay.
I think there was discussion at the time of this is what we want for Millersburg. We don't necessarily care what Albany's doing.
I can clarify this a little bit more too. Let me, I don't know, talk about the elephant in the room. What we had was a lot of metal pole barns going in everywhere. And the Planning Commission and the City Council didn't want that anymore. Metal pole barns weren't residential looking. They weren't something the city wanted to see happening. They had a feel that was very inconsistent with what the Planning Commission and City Council wanted. So most of these rules were specifically laser targeted at metal pole barns. And that conversation absolutely included the roofs, which is why I said we probably should have put this in hindsight, because we did discuss it for sure. Not for metal RV covers, but certainly for metal pole barns.
Anything else? Okay, great.
Oh, I had a few other things on my planner update, sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
A couple more. They're real short and simple. I like to bring forward any projects just to let you know about that we approved at a ministerial level, meaning at the staff level. And subdivisions and partitions are a ministerial decision. They're done at the staff level. And we recently approved a subdivision that you see here. This was a city-initiated subdivision. And it was a little bit of an odd one because it was turning 6 lots into 7 lots. And it might seem strange to do a subdivision When you already had 6 lots, why are you just creating one more? You could have done a partition. Well, we wanted to rearrange all of the lines in that subdivision, the city did. And so a subdivision was a much more appropriate vehicle to reorganize all those lots. And so that was done at the ministerial level and recently approved. So just making you folks aware of that. The next thing I want to touch on real quickly was we do have a new park that is coming along. We brought this up to the Planning Commission before. We got a grant to do a design of that park facility, and the grant is going well. We already reached out to, well, hang on, this is the location. This is, if you don't know the area, this might be a little hard to visualize, but it is right along Millersburg Road, although the access is really small, but it's a larger lot that sits behind a bunch of existing homes. And this is where the city's planning on putting the park. We did a park master plan a little while ago, and it called for a new park up in this location of the city because there wasn't a park within walking distance of most of these homes. And so this site is going to be perfect for that. And like I said, the project is going well. It started with outreach, and we did a survey of the folks who lived generally around that park and would be using that park, which basically included everybody north of Alexander. It was a pretty wide swath, and that's completed. We got a great feedback, a number of feedback. We got like 147 responses, which is great. It's wonderful. Now it's heading for our Parks Commission, and we're going to talk about that survey with our Parks Commission and let them know what kind of feedback we got. They're going to help guide us using that feedback to our consultant, which will culminate in a conceptual design, which we will then take back to the Parks Commission, make sure they're okay with it. That's not an arrow on here, but we're also going to run that past our city council because they're the bosses. And then ultimately that's going to come to you folks because a provision of that grant specified that we had to finish with an entitlement. And an entitlement means a site design review. And so it will ultimately be coming to you as a planning commission body for an official site design review. And I just wanted to let you know that that's all happening. We weren't going to bring it to you to get any feedback from you before then, but you're certainly welcome wearing your citizen hat, not your planning commission hat, to come to our Parks Commission meeting, which is on the 14th in this room at 6. So you're welcome to come to that. That's all the update I had for you. I just want to let you know this was happening and it's going well.
Thank you very much. It's now time for one of the more pleasant things to happen at the Planning Commission, to recognize someone who has done a great deal for the Planning Commission. And as I can measure my seniority on the Planning Commission here in weeks, I don't believe it would be very appropriate for me to stand up and say how grateful we are for what this person has done. So I would like to ask Janelle to do this for us, if she would.
Just to be on.
So these here. You can get to take your name tag. Oh. Yeah. So I'll just say a couple things real quick about Anne. She's, okay, correct me if I get anything wrong, because we had to look back through the dates and hopefully we got them right, because you have been around this for longer than probably all of us up here, except Scott behind you. So you started on Planning Commission in 2013, is that right? You filled a vacancy. That's what we had in our records. So 10 years on Planning Commission, and the last 2 as chair, which we really appreciate. Things don't get done without our volunteers who put in a lot of time on these things. And during that 10 years, there was a lot of change here. Like we talked about tonight, there was a whole new code. So all those questions that we were all saying, oh, this is what I remember, ask Anne afterwards, because she was here for all of that. Wow. And a lot of change at the city, went, changed planners who were here when Matt started with us. And we just really appreciate you sticking through all that time. The folks who had continuity through that were really helpful with all the change going on. You knew what was happened in the past and helped us get things up to speed here.
When I started, there was a rail outside for the horses.
Exactly.
I mean, that's the way the city of Millersburg was at that time.
So we just wanted to say thank you. We've got some cake that we're going to have afterwards if anybody wants to stick around, and hopefully all the planning commission sticks around and talks to Ann a little bit, all of her wisdom from the years. And Scott, our mayor, wants to say a couple things.
And I haven't gotten to know you too much, but I've been on the council for some time and seen you in the planning commission. And as just as mayor of the city of Millersburg, I wanted to thank you for your service. 10 years is a long time being a volunteer, which we all are. And without volunteers and people stepping up like yourself, we would be in a world of hurt, and definitely would not be where we are now without the wooden post outside for the horse, as you mentioned, but we are in a much better place. And I know this, as I've told many people in the past, the Planning Commission, as we heard tonight, is a tough spot to be at. And as we heard tonight, the decisions you make, though they come to the council, but you bear a lot of the work of that. And I very much appreciate your leadership, steering the committee, being part of the development code, huge change in our city. We recognized, as well as you, council recognized, planning commission recognized, pretty much everyone recognized that we needed to update that and improve that. And without dedication like yourself, as well as your team here, that's without the dedication of just getting to know those development codes and understanding laws and what you can and what you can't do and all that, there's a lot of work. And again, thank you. Can't express it enough, and appreciate your service and leadership for our city, and our citizens should be thankful of that. So thank you.
I'd like to say that the staff here has been stellar, and especially since Janelle and Matt and the whole gang, and the gang has been here. It's been pretty wonderful. I was on the Albany Planning Commission for 5 years and relied a lot on the staff there also. And I'm very trusting of what the intelligence and the research of these folks are. So thank you.
Well, I think we're going to need to adjourn the meeting, and then there'll be cake.
Yes.
Shall we applaud, Ann?
Yes.
I just wanted to add my thanks and appreciate all of your hard work. And let's see, there's no further agenda items. I'd like to thank you all for coming. And with that, I'd like to adjourn this meeting at 7:17. Thank you all for coming.